But later point of I realized like, the subscription based market is so awesome, and it has a so much opportunity where you can, I will say, leverage economies of scale, first of all. Second, you can integrate your robotics and automation much more, quicker. And the third is like you can keep learning, right? You can take your, I will say, automation and operational efficiencies every time to a next level, because subscription market is basically, you as you know, right? It's like I know I will be keep learning. I know every month I have to ship these many packages, right? I know the profile of my packaging, I know the profile of my customer, I know the brand, right? So the good part of that is like you have an opportunity to learn on the same, I will say, ecosystem and same environment and keep implementing it.
Welcome everyone. My name is Pat Pithani and I'm your host for Robot Forward Warehousing Podcast. And today I'm joined by Mohan based. I would say a logistic e-commerce leader with tons and tons of experience helping brands scale from a technology side as well as from the fulfillment and logistics side. So I'm really excited to chat with him. I think he brings a very unique perspective that I think it's very important for brands to also think about when they are looking into expanding and growing while at the intersection of robotics as well. So I'm really excited. I reached out to Mohan and I was like, Mohan, I think I would love to have a conversation with you. And he was humble enough to accept us and like, okay, let's have a conversation. So I'm really excited for this conversation. And Mohan, why don't you go ahead and quick introduction about yourself?
Sure, sure. So first of all, thanks a lot, Path, for having me in your show. And yeah, you and me have been talking informally as a friend, and it was really, I was too excited actually, to be very honest. Like say, hey, someone can leverage from my experience, and have some informal chit chat, and vice versa. I can learn from the same, with your experience and other people around me. So yeah, so
Awesome.
to start with my experience of pretty much 2 decades of experience, and I will say a combination of e-commerce and logistics. My first half of journey was pretty much e-commerce, empowering digital brands, marketplaces, and all that, where the challenge was scale. And when I say scale, can vary from millions of shipping transactions per day to a billion of hits into your website for tracking experience and all that. And then second half of my experience was pretty much physical, which is like definitely the supply chain aspects of 3PL and sortation, fulfillment, integration with robotics and all that, or I will say making the physical aspects of supply chain as smooth as possible, because in my view there's a lot that goes behind the scenes to ship a parcel to your house. So that's
Yep,
all about
that
me
is true.
pretty much. And the good part was like I was able to, I will say I was blessed to have such an experience with the organizations I have been working with, because it's unique, or very few people get that experience where their half of experience is on digital side and the second half they are able to map it with the physical aspects, right? So yeah, so that's pretty much about me.
Oh, that's exciting, and I think that's what the unique perspective is, and I think that's what I want to hone into more because I think many leaders that I have interviewed in previously in the podcast are coming from a very hardware focused roles or implementation or sales side. But I think with your perspective, I feel like you have a very unique perspective where you were technology and then you moved into like a one of like a what I call like an enablement perspective of robots in the warehouse. And then also you have this experience with talking to brands, understanding their needs, and trying to create a strategy around your fulfillment operations, right? Be it technology, be it hardware, be it operations, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so let me ask you this question. I think, and again, this is more of like just for my understanding as well. Um, what when do brands need to really start understanding that they are exploring, like is there a trigger point or a pain point that they start seeing at that point they realize, you know what, I need to call in experts who understand, let's say, marketplaces, technology marketplaces, and then also fulfillment operations as well? Because, and again, let me provide some context on why I'm asking this question is
Mhm.
because I tend to I've worked with brands, but I've worked with brands who have already reached out to us saying that, hey, we need fulfillment operations. Can you help us out? Uh, but I'm sure that a lot of decision has taken place before that. when they make that decision.
Yeah.
From your experience, again, there should I don't expect like a simple yes or no question answer, but more of like just paint a picture when they should start thinking about it, that bring in experts, it's time to need help.
So yeah, that's a really good question, Parth. Actually, in my personal experience, I also feel like most of the time brands may miss or take things for granted, and and we also rely on a lot of third-party expertise where some of I will say very basic things might have been missed. So if I will take myself into that shoes, so I will say, hey, what exactly I'm looking from a fulfillment perspective, right? When I'm saying what I'm looking, so there are multiple aspects. So at the end of the day, the two things will always be same. Someone is shipping a parcel and someone is receiving a parcel. So it doesn't matter what brand you are, what scale you are operating, what your customer base. But at least I will say in my experience, 80 to 90% of the cases is like, hey, someone has ordered a parcel and someone is shipping it. And when I mean by shipping, which includes pick, pack, and ship, all three aspects of a 3PL, right? So in that case, at least if I'm a brand, I need to ensure like, hey, where exactly are my, I will say, triggering point for my end consumer or end customer, right? Because say, for example, some people may be very focused around packaging of an item, right? Like say brands which are dealing with the high value goods and all that, right? And sometime there may be a brands or a customer segment which is more like hey, I need my parcel ASAP, right? Which is like a time sensitivity, right? And then sometime there will be a price sensitive market, right? So at least from a brand perspective, I need to segment my customer base. At least the starting point should be that, right? Hey, what is my customer base? And it can be multiple. It doesn't have to be like, hey, if I'm a brand ABC, I'm just dealing with them one customer segment. No, right? It can be all three, right? But the way we should handle it is differently because from a 3PL perspective, because if you are say a brand who is dealing with a price sensitivity segment, right? In that case, a brand focus will be more on a right carrier choice, basically, because a transportation piece or a transportation cost, actually, I will say, in my experience, plays a very important role, right? And a lot of I will say organizations are struggling with it, right? In my personal experience, I have seen in my own area also, right? So transportation piece has been a very pain point, and it also has an opportunity. Actually, it's a double-edged sword. So it's definitely a pain
Hmm.
point, but it has an opportunity. So that can be one area where if my market segment or a focus area is like say hey, pricing of a shipping cost or a parcel, that will be a total different ball game. Whereas second can be like hey, if my customer segment is more around high value goods, right? Like a white glove handling I need, right? I wanted to place myself in a unique proposition. In that case, definitely a same 3PL can provide you that kind of an ecosystem, but you have to very closely work with that 3PL, right? Because in that case, sometimes you cannot, have a same economies of scale, for your, processing, right? So because you are expecting a brand, you are charging a brand for, like, say, a white glove solution, and brand is okay with that because brand doesn't care about the cost or a transportation cost or a handling or a touch. Brand saying, okay, hey, I'm okay to raise my budget by say X percentage, provided my consumers are getting the right experience, right? So that's a
Hmm.
second way to look at it. And the third way, I will say, like, when you are dealing with, like, not a price sensitive market, not a high value good market, but a middle, like where you are saying, hey, you have to ship a kind of a subscription based, I will say, because there is a pretty good market, in fact, I will say, in the 3PL segment. I didn't realize it earlier, to be very honest. When I started my career with logistics, I was like, at a very high level, I came from a technologist, so I'm like, yeah, that's okay. But later point of I realized, like, the subscription based market is so awesome, and it has a so much opportunity where you can, I will say, leverage economies of scale, first of all. Second, you can integrate your robotics and automation much more, quicker. And the third is like you can keep learning, right? You can take, I will say, automation and operational efficiencies every time to a next level. The subscription market is basically, you, as you know, right? It's like I know I will be keep learning. I know every month I have to ship these many packages, right? I know the profile of my packaging. I know the profile of my customer. I know the brand, right? So the good part of that is like you have an opportunity to learn on the same, I will say, ecosystem and same environment and keep implementing it. So that way, I will say if I'm a brand, so I need to look into those three aspects, and then based on those three aspects, I need to talk to my 3PL provider, have an open conversation, and then I can say, hey, boss, for this kind of my segment, I'm a little bit more time sensitive. My cycle time is important, right? My consumers are,
Mhm.
more very, very, I will say, sensitive towards the cycle time. Some may say, hey, yeah, cycle time I can compromise a little bit here and there, but I need at least a price. I'm competing with other brands. Like say, for example, I say, hey, me and Parth are competing the same, but Parth is offering the same, branding and same product, but I wanted to be a little bit more price sensitivity, from that perspective, I will say. Yeah,
Makes sense, actually.
yeah,
Thank you for painting that picture because this was really insightful for me because I never realized that like the subscription base, white glove service, price sensitivity, there's so many other parameters that go into brands' decision when they engage with 3PLs, right? Or trying to find partners
yeah,
for the fulfillment side of it. And to your point about transportation, I think that's actually a solid point. Transport is such a big cost that folks have to incur that cost, right?
yeah, yeah,
There
yeah,
is no way that you can come out. Yeah,
yeah,
of course you can might find discounts and stuff like that,
yeah,
but you have to incur that cost. There is no
yep,
option for that. Um, it's very interesting, and as you said, like one of the things that you said, like if you have a so to your point about subscription, right? I have this thing that I say with when I engage with automation. It's like automation likes constant,
yeah,
right? So whenever also a subscription business is what it provides. Subscription says that okay, I know which 5 or 10 or 15 items I'm going to pick every month, every day,
yep,
every week. So that way I can have that constant. Of course, the each box might have some variation, but I can have. I know my SKUs are limited pretty much, and that way I can provide some automation around it, maybe a robotics
yep,
or
yep,
simple as just creating like a put pod or a pick pod pretty much, and
yep.
just pick from it like three put walls and pick it from there. I think I know someone actually doing that as well. But no, that's a very interesting paint picture. So on that note, and again, I know we had some talking points we wanted to cover, but I think is one another point I want to ask was in your experience, whenever you engage with brands,
Mhm.
what is their approach or what is their thinking? Again, just a broad stroke. What is their thinking around automation robotics when they walk the floor or when they engage with you for like an RFP perspective? What are their thoughts? What are they thinking about automation robotics?
So yeah, actually in that case, Path, I will say like different brand may have a different perspective. I have seen, I will say experienced a couple of different approaches, right? So there are few brands which thinks like, hey, automation will bring, my cost, pretty much most of the brand, or specifically if you deal with the small SMB market, right, which are not that big player, definitely price plays a critical, I will say, critical point in their whole balance sheet, right? So from their perspective, one is like, hey, it will bring my price or my fulfillment services cost down. That can be one of the perspective, right? Second perspective is like, sometime, again, it may be true, it may not be true. Sometimes people feel like, hey, automation is a magic pill, right? I will have it, and then everything will be solved. But in my experience, no, right? It's not a magic pill. It's like yes, you have to have it, but at the right time and in the right dose, I will say, right? So it's not like like a protein supplement where you don't go to gym, you just take a protein supplement, you will not build your muscles and all that. It's like a right timing, right dose, and right
That is
approach.
true.
And plus, you also have to figure out, hey, is that for me or not, right? Because sometime automation may not be the right thing for you. So that is where, like, I will say, like, when I talk to brands, so one approach from a brand perspective is like, hey, there is a lot of manual touch, in the repetitive aspects of the 3PL and all that. With the automation, will it provide consistency? Will it provide good quality, right? So like more consistency in say packaging or packing and all that. That is one. And sometime also not from a brand, but from a 3PL perspective, it becomes like a differentiator, I will say. Like say, for example, if you and me are both 3PL competitors, right? And then I can say, hey, we both go and talk to a brand where I can say, hey, Parth has picking process or say packing process, which is more like a manual driven, whereas we have these, system integrators and all that. We do that whole automation. So, from brand perspective, things may change because one of the thing that come to my mind is like, yes, definitely with automation, you are introducing less variability, right? Because automation is more like a, same process, same automation and all that.
Mhm.
You are not relying on any of the human factors and all that, or even if you are relying, it's a more like a harmony between humans and robotics, right? So that gives more confidence to brands saying, yes, hey, I can predict at least more consistency in the process, consistency in my experience if some brand is going through an automation perspective, I will say.
Yeah.
Right. So that is one of the I will say differentiator factor can happen. Same like for the subscription based market, as I'm saying, right? I will say in that case, yes, automation can bring a lot of value because you are avoiding labor cost and all that, and you are providing more, I will say, same consistent SOPs, consistent processes, minimum variability. Plus, one of the beauty I will say with automation is like you can measure it. You can measure because today with the technology, in my experience, one of the best thing we did in my organizations wherever I have worked is like measuring with all the data and all that, leveraging technology as much as possible, right? And that can
Makes
only
sense.
happen if you are well collaborated with automation, right? So that will be my say actually from an automation point of
Awesome.
view, right? So brand, again, going back to brand, they need to understand what exactly value it is bringing for them, not for 3PL though, right? So there are two different
Yeah.
perspectives. If I'm a 3PL, I may have a total different lens for having automation. Whereas if I'm a brand, I need to figure out or I need to see, again, going back to original point, like hey, this is my customer segment. This is my customers, I will say delighters or delighting factors, and this is my consumer is needing. So does this automation helps me or not? If not, then for me it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? Like I need my parcel to be delivered to my consumers with the same experience I'm expecting with the same SLAs. It doesn't matter whether you do through automation or not, unless until it is hitting my wallet, right? So
Makes sense. Makes sense. Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, this is such an interesting perspective and such an insightful because that that engaging with brands is something that I don't have any limited capabilities. So I think it's just thinking about that and learning about that is such a good thought exercise. I, to your point, right? You said the lens of 3PLs and lens of brands is going to be different for the automation.
yep,
I can see that. I also believe that trust but verify kind of process,
yep,
right? Trusted but
yep,
verified. Uh, so when I say as a 3PL, if I go say to someone, and again, thought exercise, if I say that, hey, my UPH are 300 UPH, right? And I can do picking really fast. And I know again, it's an RFP process. They are, let's say right now doing apparel. And now they are changing it to, they're going for an RFP process, and during the RFP process, say, to a lady's boot, right? Lady boots are pretty big one, right? They're
yep,
not typical size. And it's not a shoebox size. So when I go to that brand and say, hey guys, you know what? I'm going to be able to do 300 UPH for you as well, because I'm actually doing it for apparel. In my mind, and again, let's define some parameters. The parameter is it's a picking assist AMR or a cobot kind of solution.
yep,
Using apparel existing and doing 300 is still high. Let's say 180 UPH, 180 UPH, and then from a picking perspective, and then I, as a 3PL, go to the brand and say, tell brand, hey brand, I'm doing 180 UPH right now with my existing solution. I'll bring you on. I'll be still able to do 180 UPH, right? But at least from my perspective, using the same parameters versus for the new SKU type, it's gonna be difficult to do it. I will, uh, if I'm a brand, I would like to probe it more. Like, hey, can you make sure
yep,
my shoes are, it's a boots, right? So,
yep,
so what I'm trying to tell is like a trusted. Yes, I think 3PL has integrities to tell when
yeah,
they come out. But as a brand, it's important for us to, like, for a brand to validate it as well. But to validate that, they need internal expertise, right?
yeah.
They and I think that's where I wanna understand from your perspective. Are brands thinking to that detailed level yet?
That's a good question. Again, this is totally my perspective, right? Based on
Uh-huh.
my understanding, I will say no. And again, it
Mhm.
depends on brand to brand because some of the brands, like say for example, if there is a brand, right, who has their own, I will say, some form of logistics or supply chain, like they are managing their own distribution centers or sortations and all that. So they will have people or domain expertise to ask these kind of questions. Yes.
Mhm.
Right. So if I talk about a biggies like, not SMB, a pretty big brands like who are getting manufactured goods from outside US, right? And then here they are consolidating it, or say they have their own distribution center, they have some form of warehouse or some form of that. Yeah, they will have those expertise, I'm assuming. Yeah, because I've dealt with some of the brands where they have their own automation or their own warehousing team, logistics team, which are involved during RFP process, asking these questions and all that. But mostly, if you talk about SMB or a small clients or a brands, I have worked with a brand where even they don't have developers also. So they what they do, they are very small. And say for example, if tomorrow I also wanted to start something of my own, right? But I'm focusing, say, I'm just making it up like say candle market, right? I'm trying to start my whole designing of candles and all that. So what I need is a pretty much a simple website integration with market, Shopify, Celigo, and all that, and I can launch it. And I don't need my own development team. Plus, realities I will not be able to afford it also. Right. So those kind of a brand definitely they will not have that level of expertise. Right. But yes, I will say I agree 110% with you. Even if a brand has an expertise or brand doesn't have an expertise, right? They should have some level of a domain expertise, as you said, right? To validate, right? I will say trust it, but validate it because
Sure.
apple to apple comparison should have been done. And literally, like you brought up a pretty very high level point, like where say apparel versus boot. Right. I will say, man, in my experience, I have dealt a situation within the same. Say, for example, if I may have a two apparel packages, but if packaging varies, right? Say, for example, one is a poly bag, one is a just a paper bag. Handling totally screws it up, right? From automation, picking, and all that, and even like a weight. So these small things, you may have an automation, and automation also comes up with their own boundaries and constraints, right? Like say if I'm picking a box versus a size, weight, dimensions, you have scanners to scan the barcodes, right? Sometime if you are using a poly bag, like you will not believe in my life time experience, one of the interesting thing was even a color of a poly bag impacted our read rates because the
Wow.
shining, because we have a barcode and they go through automation, right? And then it reflects back the shining. If the shining of the poly bag is very high and it is
Mm-hmm.
so my cameras were failing, right?
Yep.
So just to give a perspective, like could have think like hey, does my color of a poly bag or shining intensity of a reflection quality of that poly bag will impact my read rate. Yeah, we have seen that a
Mhm.
massive, right? Like we were like, oh, what the heck happened? And then we found out, we worked with the vendors. We're like, oh man, the reason we are not able to read the barcode because it's reflecting and the reflection is throwing the camera out. So yeah, so I will say brands should actually, I will say, like even if they don't have that expertise, there is no harm in getting some consultant or at least to engage at least during the RFP process to ask the question and to at least ensure, right, hey, how they are thinking differently, right,
Mhm.
from their process A to process B, right, from a brand
Makes sense.
perspective. And same applies for the 3PL also, because sometime I have seen in my experience, like even 3PL or say like distribution centers or service providers, right? We also try to fit everything, which is not applicable. Yes, you can customize the solutions, you can make it work, but you have to think like, hey,
Yeah.
does this process will be applicable or there are nuances to every aspects, right? So from 3PL point of view, it will be always good if I'm a 3PL, I will say, hey, instead of a brand, I do that due diligence myself. And if I go to a brand, like say you are Parth as a brand for me, and I can say, hey, Parth, I have an automation which does this, for merchandise thing, but 50% of that I can do, or customize it for your boots, but I will be able to do 50%. So that kind of an honesty and a open dialogue between a brand and a 3PL, like you will always be confident on me, like say, Mohan, yeah, wow, yeah, you shared at least what you can do, instead of giving a false promise, because rest of the
Yeah.
3PL were saying, oh, we will do it. So if I as a 3PL start educating my brand, saying, hey, yes, people may say everything, right? I can say, hey, I'm selling everything, but if I can give you that insight, even though you don't have a domain expertise, right? If I can
Yeah.
share that, so you will trust me more. right?
Yeah,
That will be
that
my
is true.
approach personally. Yeah, that will be my approach from that perspective.
That is yeah. Again, I think that is true. Like honesty pays a lot, but I think, as you said, as brands evolve, I think it's a mix of it, right?
Yeah,
Mature brands usually have in-house expertise. Growing brands have, and what I have seen is when a brand is growing, uh, th- they outsource the fulfillment operations, but for them, still the focus is growth, right? Because
yeah,
they want to get the market share. Um, and usually the fulfillment operation is revisited when the numbers or the monthly invoice that they pay is not
yeah.
not according to the one that they were expecting. That's where the get engagement happens.
Yes,
But I think
yes,
this was great conversation. We talked a lot about brands. I think it was really interesting for me because I always wanted to learn more about that side of the world. Um, I let me ask a last question on brands, and then we'll get into
sure.
within the four walls. Uh, so from a brand's perspective, and I know you have done this for a while now, right? You have been engaging with 3PLs as a 3PL, as well as from a leadership perspective. You have engaged on a lot of RFPs, a lot of brands conversation. uh, what have you seen, let's say 2018 and 2024, right? 2018, if you're doing an RFP, what were the typical conversations around operations that they asked versus 2024? What are the typical questions or typical understanding they want to grab around the operations when you get engaged?
That's a good question. From between major difference, I will say between 2018 and say 2024, right? So in 2018, at least automation and robotics part was very, very, I will say, growing very, very basic. It was just getting into its teenage at that point of a time, right? So definitely at that point of a time when we were having a conversation with the brands, like I still remember in 2018, we worked with one of the biggest brand, 2018, 2019 subscription brand. Any conversation we had with them was more around technology, feasibility, scale. We didn't talk about any automation, robotics, and all that. Their whole question was like, hey, Mohan and team or the leadership team, from a technology perspective, from your OMS, from your WMS point of view, right? Do you have a ability or capability to, I will say, handle that level of a volume, right? When I'm a volume from an order ingestion point of view, and from shipment confirmations, carrier, and all that, right? So that was the talking points. Definitely, transportation was at that time also a talking point from a carrier perspective. Every brand was definitely looking for a multi-carrier solution, right? Because they wanted to have that option of between price sensitivity, like a rate shop, right? Like a price sensitive customer versus time sensitive customers and all that. So those were the things that were at that point of time pretty much more, I will say, prominent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then now when we talk about 2024, 2023, so those are the things I think a lot of the brands are taking things for granted, or they expect the 3PL, to have that by default or out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
Because nowadays with so much competition in the market, so many players in the market, right? So technology cannot be the differentiator, I will say. Right. So definitely now the talks are next level, like, hey, from an automation point of view, from a, more like I will say collaboration or harmony between automation and technology, right? How well it is, right? And that is one thing actually, that's a really good point, Parth. I will emphasize it like for the engineering leaders, actually, if anyone who will listen to it, right? So in 2018 or 19 era, right? And prior to that, right? Engineers or a technologist were supposed to be sitting, or they are expected, or they themselves used to say, hey, what the hell I will do in the floor, right? I'm writing a code in my own office and just getting the requirement from a business analyst or someone, who is giving me a requirement, right? So that kind of a thing, I will say, should be changed now, in my personal view, because unless and until your engineers understand the physical lay of the land, right, they may not be able to write the right software for your warehousing and logistics, right? Even today, I met engineers or leaders or architects who's like, hey, Mohan, like, what I will do in the floor, right? Like, I will be wasting my 4 hours there on the floor. So they see spending time on the floor as a wasting. Whereas in my view is like, hey, if you spend 4 hours on the floor, literally in this supply chain logistic world, we are blessed to see how my software or how my technology, how my integration, how my robotics is getting used by that third person, right? Who literally damn care about what you did or what you built, whether you wrote in a Java, C Sharp, C++, Python, or whether whatever behind the scene data models you have used. It doesn't matter. For me, I am getting $12 per hour or say $15 per hour. Right? Are you solving my problem? Am I able to use it? Otherwise, what I will do, like I will just do a dry picking, right? Oh, this piece of technology is not working, or it is not. So that kind of a mind shift should be changed, I will say. I don't know how many companies are doing that, but at least in my perspective, I have tried that to change in my own teams and all that, where I'm a big proponent of, hey, spend time on the floor. Spend like
Mhm.
if in your development cycle, or like say, if you are using safe as a model for your practices, we do a program intervals where you can have a multiple sprints. You plan for a quarter. I will say in every plan, if every quarter, have a plan where you have key developers or key people from your team spend the time on the floor, understand the process, understand the pain point. Not like you are not trusting the requirement, but again, going back to our point is like, you trust the requirement, but at least validate it, right?
Correct.
So that is where, like, I will say perspective should change from 2018 versus in 2024 or moving forward. So that was a pretty, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, that was great. Actually, I think what you said was going on the floor. I think it's such an important point. I think in my past roles, I was helping with the WMS design, and one thing that I always because it was a startup, so we were working on the in-house WMS, and of course,
Hmm.
with any in-house WMS, you're not working with the best and the tier one softwares, right? You're
Yep.
working with like in-house developers, in-house systems that they can develop within overnight, but they need to know what they're developing, because a simple change can either help one warehouse and kill other warehouses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like a lot
Yeah.
control, like for example, I tell you example, one lot control, we implemented a logic where lot control was really helpful for one of the warehouse, but we also included a constraint with it, which impacted the other warehouse, where they stopped doing the batch picking for single and single unit orders for batch control, right? So we honestly, that's one of the things that we started now. I think I was on the floor, but again, I'm not the developer. I was not the software engineering leader. I was the industry engineering leader. uh, s- but again, to your point, being on the floor is such an important point, and I think
Yeah.
I think if I can use a bullhorn and go on the top of the hill and shout about it, I would do it. That, hey guys, if you're developing something beyond the floor, that's the only way to develop something that. And one important thing that you said, right? This is the only industry where whatever you write, you can see back to it, right? It's such a again, you hit a chord there to me, because few years back I started shifting out, and I was like, I don't want to do supply chain. I want to do something else. And I did a small sting at a software company, and it's a great software, great company. But as you said, I was not able to see what I'm making a change, or like I was
Oh
not
yeah, yeah,
able to
yeah, yeah,
see the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
material impact.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
I like, I need to
No.
come back. I need to come back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. No, no,
I did
no.
like a 6 7 months there, and I like, nope, I'm coming back to supply chain. I think this is, I
Oh man.
see my efforts delivering something.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's where one of my personal experience, like as I said, right, my first half was pretty much digital, very, very highly technologies, like work with companies like say Microsoft, Dell, and with PB and all that. But one thing I remember, like, yes, technology wise, you can solve a lot of challenging problems, right? Because I have been working with one of the world's biggest marketplace, right? So work for them as a client and partnership for almost, I was in 9 years, right? So the learning that I had there, I will not disclose the name, but everyone knows, right? So world's biggest marketplace, whether
Hmm.
it's a cross border, whether it's a domestic, whether it's a consumer experience, client experience, right? So they were like, I will say, we learned a lot because they were like, they kept us on our toes every time, 24 by 7, I will say. But the impact that we were making, right? Whatever we are writing from a technology point of view, from a scale and all that, like, we don't know actually, to be very honest, how that end consumer is getting impacted because we were behind the scene. We were in an engine room, right? So in the marketplace, their people were dealing with their consumers and all that. But in the second half of my journey, when I saw, the software that we are writing or the integrations that we are doing or the problem that we are solving is for a person, who is just next to us. Talk to him, talk, and you will learn a lot. It made a literally a great difference in terms of giving you a purpose. So then
Yeah.
my personal purpose changed actually. So even some people, my friend says, hey Mohan, do you really wanted to go back to the technology side of that? I'm like,
Hmm.
no man, I don't think I will enjoy it, right? Yes, I have that experience with me. I can guide people. Yes, definitely. If nothing there, yes, I have played in that game, can join that game anytime. But I will say, if personally my someone will ask me, I will say no. Something that give me a purpose, something that give me a kick is this, because you make a change, and if you really wanted to validate your hypothesis or your perspective, just go to warehouse where this is getting launched and see it, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, man, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree on that one.
Yeah, I learned it hard way. I gave away my 6 to 7 months, and that's like, yeah. I mean, learned it hard way. I would say that was a good experience as well
Yeah,
because
experience, yeah,
that really
yeah,
cemented my like, no, this is what
yeah.
I want to do. I am not gonna be I'm not gonna leave this bandwagon anymore.
I agree, agree,
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. No, this again, Mohan. I think we're supposed to talk about robots. We talked about brands, and it's fun. Like when we have this kind of conversation, it's always good. Because for me, one of the challenge that I feel like I'm trying to solve is like I want to give. Of course, everyone likes to put robots on the warehouse. I love to put
Yeah,
robots on the
yeah,
warehouse, but I think eh, it it's not something that in like on and off switch. It takes time. It
yeah,
needs to develop. It needs to have resources around it. It needs to have internal teams around it. Uh, so that's my opinion, but I would love to see your thought process or your background or your insights into it. Like, if I'm an operator and if
mhm,
I want to start, let's say I'm today, 1 year from now, I want some kind of robots in my warehouse, and I'm an operator. I am an engineering leader, be it software or industrial, doesn't matter. But I'm an engineering leader. For 1 year from now, I want to start. I want to put robots in one of my building. I have, let's say, 10 buildings. How should I start thinking about it? Any guidelines, any playbook that you found very successful that folks can leverage on?
yeah. So I will say definitely, because one thing, one, I will say people take this for granted. Earlier, I was saying, robotics is a pill, magic pill, it will solve all the problems and all that. But practically, what I have seen is initially there is a lot of whenever, like, say, you put a robotics, right? So one misconception of a operator or someone on the floor is like, it will took my job, right? And I'm
Mm,
being very candid, right? So one of the way robots or robotic solutions has been targeted in the market is like, hey, we are dealing with the human labor, right? Like, or a passive message, not an active, or a passive message can be, hey, we are avoiding dependency from a human labor, right? So think from that perspective, right? If your first pitch is about, human labor, right, definitely, and you are trying to sell that same thing to that human, right, he will not have much appreciation for that, because his perspective is that, hey, sooner or later my job will get impacted by that, right? And in my view, that is not true, though, because it's robotics is not only for replacing human labor. It's just a one outcome or one aspect of it, right? In my last, I will say, I had decades of experience. I learned a lot with all my peers, right? So, I was not from the day one, I was not into supply chain logistics. One thing I will say, I was blessed in Pitney Bowes to have learned from so much automation leadership, engineering leadership, right? Which comes from a diverse, background, from big 3PL, big supply chain thing, right? So which I learned a lot from them. So normally in our perspective, it's like, people, process, and technology, right? If you see, so any robotics, you should first focus on people part. So these all three things should go together, because robotics, in my view, is a harmony between people and a technology, right? So if I piece robotics as a technology, you cannot say, hey, this is against you. It is like, hey, this is for you. So when
mhm.
you start putting that this is for you, your perspective as a SI, system integrators, or as a 3PL, or a leadership who is trying to minimize cost or increase, PPH, or, any picking rates and all that, will totally change. Now you are not putting a person hat, like, say, hey, I'm here for replacing this person, or dealing with a, labor market, but I'm trying to optimize or add more operational efficiencies. Indirect outcome is definitely the same, because today
Mm-hmm.
if you will optimize your operations or processes, maybe for activity ABC you might be needing three people, now you may need one, right? Definitely that's an indirect way, but from a selling point you should not approach, or we should not market it that way. So whenever you are dealing, with an automation launch or robotics launches in your DCs or distribution centers, right? So I will say, first thing you need to understand, okay, forget about people part, because it will come automatically, right? Everywhere, like more and more you optimize the processes, more and more you will go, you will add more efficiencies, you will reduce human touch and all that. So that should be by default as an outcome. But if we keep that aside, think from what other problem, from a warehouse perspective, or from a, like say, a leader, or a facility director, or say supervisor, for that matter, even a daily wage worker, right? What are the pain points which this kind of a solution will solve, right? And then start targeting those, because one of the key aspect in my view is their buy-in, right? People on the floor should have buy-in and trust in your solution. And even for me also, right? So if you and me are talking or anything, like there, most of the time is like, hey, what is there in for me? Like it is always not a transactional, but sometimes, hey, I feel good about learning. You feel good about learning, right? As a human nature, human psychology is always
Mm-hmm.
about like, hey, unless until I enjoy talking to you or someone else, or there is some mutual advantage, people will not have that interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that should be the way to target it. Like say, okay, let's collaborate with one of the distribution centers. And again, the second part I will say, don't try to boil the ocean in one go, right? If you have say 15 distribution centers for an automation robotics, don't try to launch it in all the 15 at the same time. I'm not saying you should not do it. Depend on the scale, depend on the competencies. Yeah, I'm saying if
Right.
I will be that person, maybe I will learn all the 15 distribution centers. I will from my due diligence and a homework perspective, I will say, hey, my team and me should study all the 15 distribution centers, outline commonalities of the processes, outline variations in the processes. As you said, like sometime one distribution center or a warehouse works differently than other distribution center and warehouse, right? It will never be the same, and there are a lot of variables that drives that, right? But from a robotics, I will say, launch in one, right? And with the trusted people, because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you need your people to be your spokesperson, right? And that happened with me, trust me. So there was a solution without getting into more
Mm-hmm.
detail. So I
Mm-hmm.
was started with the solution by putting up a whole data dashboard, visibility, and all that. It was based on process mining, data analytics, and with the help of machine
Mm-hmm.
learning, right? So our goal was like, hey, target it in all the tier one facilities. But the challenge was like, it was very hard to convince all the tier one facilities, because every time you talk to a facility director or engineering leader or anyone, like everyone will have their own perspective, which is valid. And they'll say, hey, what is there in for me? Right. And plus, it is not tried and tested. So there will always be a little bit of a, ambiguity, unknowns, right? People will not be 100% in, right? So from that perspective, what we did, like what we tried is like we partnered with one warehouse or one region, leadership on one, and then we worked with her, the leadership of that particular distribution center, and we both share same, affinity for operational efficiencies and all that, and that's what happened. Like we started launching, and then indirectly, then I don't have to sell it to anyone else, because that entire region became my spokesperson or our spokesperson.
Mm.
Because once you
Makes
start
sense.
seeing the outcome, other distribution center were like, hey, Mohan, we wanted to have that in our facility also. When we can
Okay.
expect a launch? So the whole discussion changed. Instead of me chasing like, hey, we wanted to launch it in your distribution center, it became like, hey, Mohan, when we can have it, can we have it? And literally
Yep.
when I was in the floor, right, these are the things, right, which gives you a purpose. I like, so there are
Mm.
supervisors who are like, hey, the thing that you did in this facility, right, man, I want this in our facility. Can you help us in that? I'm like, wow, because
Nice.
that
Nice.
that makes a difference, right? So that is
Yeah,
another
it does.
reason when I was saying, you have to be on the floor, because you have to build
Yeah.
that relationship. They should not think you as a person like who is, writing a code in a AC room. Damn doesn't know about like, I'm working in 100 plus Fahrenheit, or like 110 in one of the Texas region,
Mhm.
and sweating myself. And these people just write something. And that is the perception, I will say, right? Not
Yeah.
all, but people will say, hey, these are engineers, and same vice versa. And engineers will be like, hey, these people doesn't understand. So sometime I give this feedback to my team is, yeah, they don't understand because they you are engineer, right? And if the day they start understanding, maybe we will not need engineers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's true. That's true.
So
That is true. I think it's such a full circle moment for me, because I think you touched on a couple of points which I felt like was really interesting. One is like start with people, right? Find those constants, if you will, or go across, do the due diligence for all the sites, find commonalities, and then start with a, like one MVP or a POC, if you will, like a minimum viable or what, however you want to call it, right?
yeah, yeah,
Start somewhere, and that becomes your, if you do it right, so that becomes your cornerstone within your company for a story of success, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because I do see the value there, and I've been very vocal about that. Let's, if you want to do it the right way for the first time, so the next time you don't have to explain why we are doing it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think you also made a very, I would say, a highlighting comment. I would say it was like, robots is not against you; it's for you, right?
exactly.
I think
Yes,
that's a very, very solid point. And to a level, if I am a warehouse operator, if I see a humanoid, I'm gonna be thinking about that. Like, hey, he's gonna be
yeah,
against me. So humanoids are not gonna
yeah,
help, even though we want to spill it anyway. I think humanoids have their story, they have their importance, no doubt about it. But I think when it comes to warehouse operators, because they don't get paid to learn new technologies, right? They,
exactly.
or
Yeah,
warehouse associate, they get paid to ship orders or pack an order or pick an item. So for them, if something is doing the same thing which is automated or mechanized, they are gonna look at it as something is being taken away from it.
yeah.
I completely understand that. I will not go and fight for that, because I would have felt the same way. But yeah, I think it's very important for the leaders of that company who is trying to implement robot. Like, it's not against you; it's for you.
Yes, 100% agreed, man.
Yeah. No, this is great conversation. I know we were planned to talk something else, but we are 48 minutes into the conversation. So I do want to be respectful for your time,
Yeah,
Mohan. But this has been a great conversation. I think I learned a lot about 3PLs, their way of thinking, brands, their way of thinking into when they consider automation. So I appreciate all the insights, and I think I know the audience will appreciate it as well. So any departing thoughts, Mohan?
so man, I would say, it was really great talking to you because I love sharing ideas and thoughts with the same industry leaders and all that, right? And I will say that from a supply chain perspective, this is the one of the, I will say, not the only. This is one of the profession where you can really learn a lot by having your boots on the ground. And I will
Yeah.
say, if you are a technologist, right? I know from a technology point of view, we talk about a lot of things now, data, machine learning, AI, and all that, all good, right? Nothing. But unless and until you really put your boots on the ground, you understand the real perspective. You can make things happen, but the impact may not be that big, I will say, right? So sometime a small smile on a warehouse operator can make a big difference, rather than, writing 10,000 lines of a code, I will say, because I have seen both. So for engineers, I will say, see that purpose, right? See
Yeah.
how you can bring that smile, on an operator's face.
Oh man, there's nothing I can say after this. I think we're gonna end this here. This is such a great point, and thank you, Mohan, for joining today.
Thanks a lot, Pat. Thank you. Nice to talk to you, man.
You have been listening to Robot Forward Warehousing Podcast with Paul Pithan. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast player. If you like what you heard, please rate us and help us reach more warehouse robotics practitioners. Thank you for listening. Until next time.